Congress just made a move that nobody saw coming. And if you are collecting Social Security right now, the next 60 days could change everything about your monthly income. We are not talking about rumors or maybes. Actual legislation is sitting on Capitol Hill right now that could put money directly into your bank account before the new year. The Social Security Administration has already begun notifying beneficiaries about payment adjustments. And here is what most people do not understand. These are not your typical cost of living increases. We are looking at a completely different mechanism that involves stimulus payments working alongside your regular benefits. The timing matters because Congress is operating under a specific deadline, and if you are not aware of what is happening, you could miss out on funds that are legally yours. But there is a catch that is catching thousands of seniors off guard. The eligibility requirements have changed from previous stimulus rounds, and your income threshold is not the only factor anymore. Your filing status, your benefit type, and even when you started collecting Social Security all play a role in determining what you will receive. Let me be completely straight with you about what is actually unfolding right now in Washington because there is a lot of confusion swirling around. Right now, as we are heading into December, there are multiple pieces of legislation moving through Congress that directly impact Social Security beneficiaries. And the reason this matters so much is because we are seeing something we have not seen since the pandemic era. Lawmakers are once again discussing direct payments to Americans, but the framework they are using this time is completely different from what we experienced 2020 and 2021. What is really happening is that Congress is facing enormous pressure from constituents across the country who are struggling with costs that have not come back down to earth. Even though inflation numbers have technically improved, you know this firsthand if you have been to the grocery store lately, or if you have paid your heating bill, or if you have tried to fill a prescription. The official inflation rate might say things are stabilizing, but your actual purchasing power tells a different story. And Congress knows this. They are hearing it from people just like you in town halls, in letters, in phone calls to their offices. So, several representatives have introduced bills that would provide additional financial relief specifically targeted at Social Security recipients. And this is where things get interesting because the approach they are taking could actually work within the budget constraints they are facing. The first thing you need to understand is that this is not technically being called a stimulus check in the official language of the bills. The terminology matters here because it affects how the money gets appropriated and how quickly it can be distributed. What we are looking at instead are emergency Social Security supplemental payments. And the distinction might seem minor, but it is actually huge in terms of how the system processes these funds. Under the proposed legislation, the Social Security Administration would have the authority to issue these payments using existing distribution infrastructure, which means they could get money out much faster than if they had to create an entirely new payment system like they did during the pandemic. Remember how long some people waited for those stimulus checks? Because the IRS had to verify addresses and set up direct deposit for millions of people who had never received electronic payments before. That whole nightmare could be avoided this time around. Now, let us talk about the actual numbers being discussed, because this is where you need to pay close attention to which version of the legislation might actually pass. The initial proposal that got the most attention suggested a one-time payment of $1,200 to every Social Security beneficiary, regardless of whether you are receiving retirement benefits, disability benefits, or survivor benefits. That number is not random. It is based on calculations that factor in the cumulative loss of purchasing power that fixed income recipients have experienced since 2022. Even after accounting for the cost of living adjustments you have been receiving, the calculations show that despite those annual COLA increases, the average Social Security recipient has still lost about 11% of their real purchasing power over the past 3 years. And that $1,200 figure is meant to help close that gap. But here is where the political reality comes into play. And this is something you absolutely need to understand because it affects whether any of this actually happens. The initial $1,200 proposal faces significant opposition in Congress, not because lawmakers do not think seniors deserve support, but because of the total price tag. With roughly 70 million Americans receiving Social Security benefits of one form or another, a $1,200 payment to everyone would cost about $84 billion. That is a massive expenditure. And there are members of Congress who are deeply concerned about adding to the federal deficit, especially when we are already running trillion-dollar annual deficits. So, what is happening now is that the bill is being amended and negotiated, and the version that seems to have the best chance of actually passing involves a scaled approach based on your total income. The compromised version that is gaining traction would provide the full $1,200 to individuals whose total annual income, including Social Security, is below $35,000. And for married couples filing jointly, that threshold would be $60,000. If your income is above those levels, the payment would be reduced on a sliding scale, decreasing by $100 for every $5,000 of additional income until it phases out completely at incomes above $55,000 for individuals and $90,000 for couples. This sliding scale approach is similar to what was used in previous stimulus rounds. And while it means some people will not receive anything, it dramatically reduces the overall cost of the program, bringing it down to somewhere around $42 billion, which is a number that seems to have enough support to potentially pass both chambers of Congress. What makes this particularly urgent right now is the legislative calendar and the political dynamics at play. Congress is facing a deadline because they need to finalize the federal budget, and there is a real possibility that these supplemental payments could be included in the larger budget reconciliation package. If that happens, it would only require a simple majority to pass rather than the 60 votes typically needed to overcome a filibuster in the Senate. The reconciliation process is complex, but the bottom line is that it provides a pathway for this legislation to actually become law, even in our deeply divided political environment. However, the reconciliation bill needs to be finalized before the end of the calendar year, which means decisions are being made right now, literally as we are speaking, about what gets included and what gets left out. The timing of when you would actually receive these payments depends entirely on when and if the legislation passes. The Social Security Administration has indicated that if they receive authorization and funding before December 20th, they could begin issuing payments as early as the first week of January, piggybacking on the regular Social Security payment schedule. This is actually really important because it means you would not have to do anything special to receive the money. If you are already receiving Social Security through direct deposit, the supplemental payment would show up in your bank account as a separate transaction from your regular benefit. If you receive your Social Security via a Direct Express debit card, the payment would be loaded onto that same card. And if you still receive paper checks in the mail, you would receive a separate paper check for the supplemental amount. But there is another piece of this puzzle that is causing confusion, and I want to make sure you understand what is real and what is speculation. Some news outlets and social media posts have been suggesting that these supplemental payments might be tied to changes in the regular Social Security benefit structure. And that has created a lot of anxiety among beneficiaries who are worried that accepting a one-time payment might somehow reduce their monthly benefits going forward. Let me be absolutely clear about this. Nothing in any of the proposed legislation would reduce your regular monthly Social Security benefit. These supplemental payments are being structured as emergency relief completely separate from your earned benefits. Your monthly Social Security check is based on your lifetime earnings record and the age at which you claim benefits, and that calculation does not change regardless of whether you receive a supplemental payment. What is changing, and this is significant, are some of the rules around Social Security taxation and the earnings limit for people who are collecting benefits before full retirement age while still working. There is a separate piece of legislation moving through Congress that would eliminate federal income tax on Social Security benefits entirely. Right now, if your combined income, which includes half of your Social Security benefits plus all your other income, exceeds certain thresholds, you have to pay federal income tax on up to 85% of your Social Security benefits. Those thresholds are incredibly outdated. They were set back in 1984 and have never been adjusted for inflation, which means more and more people are getting caught in this tax trap every single year. The proposed legislation would eliminate this tax completely, which for many beneficiaries would be worth far more than a one-time $1,200 payment. Let me give you a real example of how significant this would be. If you are a single filer receiving $24,000 a year in Social Security and you have another $15,000 in income from a pension or part-time work under current law, you are paying federal income tax on up to 85% of your Social Security benefits. Depending on your overall tax situation, that could easily cost you $2,000 or more in federal taxes every single year. Eliminating that tax would put that money back in your pocket every year for the rest of your life. That is why some advocates are actually pushing for Congress to prioritize the tax elimination over the one-time payments, arguing that it provides more long-term benefit to seniors. The other major change being discussed involves the earnings limit for people who claim Social Security before reaching full retirement age but continue working. Under current rules, if you are below full retirement age and you earn more than a certain amount, which for next year is $22,320, the Social Security Administration withholds $1 in benefits for every $2 you earn above that limit. This rule has been incredibly controversial because it essentially penalizes people who want or need to continue working while also collecting the benefits they have earned. The proposed changes would significantly increase that earnings threshold or eliminate it entirely, allowing people to work and collect their full benefits regardless of how much they earn. This would be a game changer for people who claimed benefits at 62 or 63 because they needed the income but who are still capable of working and want to continue earning. Now, I need to address something that is causing a lot of concern and confusion in the Social Security community, and that is the question of whether Social Security itself is in trouble and whether these supplemental payments or tax changes somehow make the program's financial situation worse. This is a really important topic because there is a lot of fear-mongering out there, and you deserve to understand the actual facts. Social Security is funded through payroll taxes, and yes, the trust funds that handle the accounting for the program are projected to be depleted in the early 2030s if Congress does not take action. But depleted does not mean broke or bankrupt. Even after the trust funds are depleted, Social Security would still collect enough in payroll taxes to pay about 80% of scheduled benefits. That is not acceptable, and it needs to be fixed. But it is very different from the program disappearing or collapsing. These supplemental payments we are discussing would not come from the Social Security trust funds at all. They would be funded through general federal revenue the same way the pandemic stimulus checks were funded. So receiving a supplemental payment does not weaken Social Security's financial position. The tax elimination is more complicated because Social Security benefits are paid from the Social Security trust funds. But the federal income taxes that some beneficiaries pay on those benefits actually go back into the general treasury, not into the Social Security trust funds. Eliminating that tax would reduce federal revenue, but it would not directly impact Social Security's finances. What is really fascinating about this moment is that we are seeing a potential convergence of short-term relief and long-term reform. And that does not happen very often in Washington. The political pressure to provide immediate help to seniors struggling with high costs has created an opening for larger conversations about how we structure Social Security taxation and work incentives. Some policy experts are optimistic that this could lead to more comprehensive Social Security reform that addresses the long-term funding issues while also making the program work better for current beneficiaries. Other analysts are more skeptical, arguing that Congress will provide the short-term relief as a political win, but will continue kicking the can down the road on the harder structural issues. So where does all this leave you as someone who depends on Social Security? First, and most importantly, you need to be prepared for the possibility that some form of supplemental payment could arrive in January or February. Do not spend money you do not have yet, but also do not be surprised if you see an unexpected deposit in your account. Make sure your direct deposit information is up to date with the Social Security Administration because that is the fastest and most secure way to receive any payment. If you have moved recently or changed banks, go to the Social Security website or call their customer service line to update your information. Second, keep watching what Congress actually does over the next few weeks because the situation is fluid and changing. What I am telling you today is based on where negotiations stand right now, but things could change quickly. Third, be extremely skeptical of anyone who contacts you claiming to help you get your stimulus payment or asking for personal information or payment to process your claim. The Social Security Administration will never call you asking for personal information, and you will never have to pay anything to receive a supplemental payment if one is authorized. Any payment will be automatic based on your existing Social Security records. The bottom line is this: real help might actually be coming, and unlike a lot of what you hear in the news or online, this is not speculation or wishful thinking. There are actual bills with actual co-sponsors moving through the actual legislative process. Will everything I have described definitely happen? No, because this is Congress we are talking about, and nothing is certain until the president signs it into law. But the momentum is real, the need is obvious, and the political incentives are aligned in a way that makes meaningful action more likely than it has been in years. Your job is to stay informed, ignore the scams and misinformation, and be ready to make smart decisions about any additional funds that might come your way.